The early signing period is here. Josh, how do you feel about the Oklahoma Sooners 2023 recruiting class? We'll figure that out. But we're also going to talk wide receivers and why Oklahoma keeps missing out on some Tulsa guys. And what's up with Dillon, Gabriel, and Marvin Mims? No decision, a decision coming. We'll talk about that on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. We're free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, so go hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at thesoonerswire.com. He's Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on 94.7 The Ref in Norman. Josh, we made it to the first kind of major milestone, I guess you could say, for the 2023 recruiting cycle, early signing period.
And it's a great class for Oklahoma. Keep in mind, as we are taping here, as we're sharing some of these thoughts with you, no, the decision for Peyton Bowen flipping, will he flip, won't he flip, hasn't been officially made just yet. And similarly to Siliakana, right? We don't have the total answer there. So let's just talk about what we do know about the 2023 class as currently comprised. John, top 10 class nationally, which for a program that has struggled through, a 6-6 could finish 6-7, could be as great as a 7-6 season. I don't want to say it's a miracle for a program like Oklahoma, right? Because probably you should always be recruiting top 10 classes at OU. But man, it wouldn't have been shocking this year if, having gone through this 6-6 season, if this class wasn't potentially knocking on the door of a top 5 national class, if it wasn't locked in as a top 10 class nationally. So I think just big picture view starting there, a great job in the first full recruiting cycle for Brent Venables, for his collective staff. John, across the board, you start with the quarterback with Jackson Arnold, of course. In college football, a lot of times sort of begins and ends with that position, and in football in general, right? The teams that, generally speaking, are winning national championships and Super Bowls, generally speaking, they get pretty amazing quarterback play. And Oklahoma, we think, has somebody that is going to be an NFL Sooner of the future, and Oklahoma's potential next Heisman winner in Jackson Arnold, that type of caliber quarterback, right? At least in the conversation for those sorts of national awards. So it starts there. Then you start thinking about some of the defensive players up front. I'm really excited about PJ Adebawore. That's someone that, as we navigated our way through this cycle, John, started out a little bit just outside that fringe 5-star status, and then all of a sudden, boom, did find himself with that 5th and final 5-star status for Oklahoma. It goes on and on and on. LeBlanc, that's somebody defensively to be excited about. I think along the offensive line up front, Caden Green, to me, is somebody that could be, if you asked me, who do you feel best about being an NFL player out of this signing class right now today? I mean, it's obvious to look at the 5-star guys and say, okay, well, I'm going with Adebawore, I'm going with Arnold. But I think Caden Green's got a chance to be really, really special at the University of Oklahoma, John. So skill guys, there's, of course, skill guys with Smothers, with Hicks, with Brown, and with Petaway. So it's just, to me, top to bottom, a very, very well-rounded class, which, even the great classes in years past for Oklahoma weren't necessarily well-rounded like this one. So big picture, that's probably a lot of words to say, man, this is a day that you as Sooner fans, maybe we've done this song and dance before with previous signing classes, and that's just par for the course at Oklahoma. But, man, this is a heck of a signing class that OU's bringing in.
It is just on the surface right now. You talked about being well-rounded. I know we talked about it like last week. It was like 7 of their top 9 were defensive players. Well, with the 247 Sports update, it was 6 of their top 10 are defensive players. You saw 4 players in your top 10 as a recruiting class that are coming from the offensive side of the ball in Jackson Arnold and Jaquays Petaway and Caden Green and Dalen Smothers. Like, you've got really good players coming to Oklahoma that are going to be game-changing players for you. But it's, as you mentioned, like, I feel like they hit pretty much every position group in the guys that are 4 and 5 star players, right? Get your 5-star quarterback. You got 4-star wide receivers. You got a 4-star running back. You got a 4-star offensive lineman. You got a couple 4-star offensive linemen, including Josh Bates, who's a 247 Sports composite 4-star, in going along with Caden Green. You've got 4-star defensive backs. You got 4-star linebackers. You got 4-star defensive linemen. Like, everywhere, you've got at least one blue chip player that you're adding to your roster that has a 4 or 5-star. Like, that's huge for you. Like, to be able to add that kind of talent and then add guys like some of the 3-star players that they have that were probably a little under recruited through the first part of their senior year, started to come on strong October, November. I'm thinking of Ashton Sanders. I'm thinking of Taylor Wayne in particular, guys that didn't, I mean, Ashton Sanders had a couple Power 5 offers. He was being heavily recruited and at one point was committed to Cal, decommitted to Cal. Wisconsin was really in hot pursuit of him. And then you look at Taylor Wayne, like, he didn't really start getting Power 5 offers until November. And then he got a slew of them from Virginia Tech, from USC, from Oklahoma. And so some of those guys, like, they might be really, really good players. That 3-star status might not be truly indicative of the type of player that they are. And Eric McCarty, right? Playing for McAllister, not a nationally known program across the country, not a place that you're seeing a lot of top tier talent come from. And so sometimes people just kind of fly under the radar a little bit. Now, this is a guy that's been committed to Oklahoma for a long time now, but you look at the star status and it's easy to kind of deceive yourself a little bit into thinking, okay, they might not be as good as the 4 or 5 stars, but we've seen plenty of times 3 stars come in and be game breakers, game changers for the Oklahoma Sooners. And I think they have a group of 3 stars that are probably going to be very important cogs for this Oklahoma Sooners team in the years to come. Another guy, Heath Ozida. Like, I was writing up, just kind of pre-writing some stuff, just, thinking about this class, getting ready for, early signing period coverage. And I went back and rewatched Heath Ozida. That dude's a freak, man. The size that he has and the agility and athleticism that he has to go along with it, it's something that has a chance to be very special at offensive tackle for Oklahoma. So just top to bottom, I'm really excited about the class. Yeah, the 5 stars are huge. You add another 5-star potentially in Peyton Bowen, and that just is the icing on the cake to me. Like, this class, as it is currently composed, looks really good. Oh, and we didn't even talk about Dane McCullough, another great addition, a football coach's kid, a football player's kid that is going to have an impact on this team. So it's just really, really well done by this whole coaching staff, putting this class together over the last year and holding on to it and maintaining it. Yeah, you had a couple decommits. You had guys that flipped to different places. But, there were some extenuating circumstances to some of that. You got Jackson Arnold early, and he has never wavered once from his commitment. Joshua Bates, another guy, committed back in the summer of 2021, hasn't wavered once. And I think that's the strength of this class, is its cohesiveness, its unity, and its desire to be Oklahoma Sooners.
Hopefully a couple of these guys are ready to step in and be difference makers from day one. That would be, as we start projecting to 2023 for this signing class, that would be huge for just Oklahoma as a program to have, whether, wide receivers, an easy spot to look at, just given kind of what that looks like at Oklahoma, to say, okay, maybe Brown or Petaway can come right in and be legitimately one of the top 4 receivers on Oklahoma. I mean, if Oklahoma's winning the Big 12, John, probably that's going to have to happen for one of those 2 guys, right? I mean, if we're projecting those types of results for Oklahoma next season, you're going to need some of those contributions. But like you talked about, man, I just think about the defensive backfield. I mean, some of these names they're bringing in, Vickers, Jacoby Johnson, up and down, Josiah Wagner. I mean, it's like Dane McCullough. That's blue chip, blue chip, blue chip, blue chip. So they are really, really bringing in some talented players. Went and got the one JUCO ad in Dolby that could be, you start talking about just that, John, guys that could step in and be instant difference makers. Well, JUCO routes, somebody that typically you kind of feel like sort of fits that type of portfolio. And then the 3 stars that you mentioned or we're discussing, there's 8 of them. And wouldn't it be great if Oklahoma hits on half, right? If 4 of those are legit by the time their careers are done in Oklahoma, guys that we look back on and say, okay, absolutely, they made an impact on OU. I think Logan Howland, to me, is one of the most intriguing guys in this whole class, John, because he hasn't played necessarily a ton up front, right? So he's raw, he's 6'7", he's listed 280. He's obviously, I mean, they're going to, I would imagine, add 40 pounds to his frame by the time that he's done, maybe more, at the University of Oklahoma. So he's going to add some serious weight here in just being 6'7" and then getting that weight added on. That's a top 500 kid nationally right now that could really develop into much more than the 3-star that he is. Pachotti, I've heard good things about him as a linebacker. Eric McCarty, we've talked at length in the past about getting in-state kids that maybe have slipped through the cracks a little bit that want to be here, and Eric McCarty certainly fits that profile. And I didn't mention him. Probably he's going to play all over for Oklahoma, but it's a great class, man. I like the mix of obviously the blue chip power up top, and then those 8 3-stars, man. I think there could be some sneaky, talented surprises in there for Oklahoma.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's a really intriguing class from top to bottom. The 3-stars in particular, you come in with as a 3-star, you're going to have a little bit of a chip on your shoulder. And I think they've got some really intriguing tools to work with. You know, they're not just guys that had good production. You just look at what they put on tape and just some really intriguing tools. And so that's going to be really fun to see how this coaching staff develops that and kind of creates an opportunity or, you know, has them earn opportunities. Because I think there are going to be opportunities for some of these younger guys to play a little bit in 2023, especially the early signees. We'll see how that rolls out. Speaking of the wide receiver group, speaking of getting in-state kids, let's talk next about missing out on a couple. But first, let me talk to you about BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest place to bet on all your favorite sports, from basketball to baseball, college football, the NFL, and Major League Baseball futures. You can get in on the action over at BetOnline. It's simple, it's easy to use, and they've got all the odds, the information, whatever sport you're looking for, esports included, they got it for you over at BetOnline. Again, BetOnline is where the game starts. And thanks for listening to Locked On Sooners and making it your first listen every single day. Also, go check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast with our guy, Peter Bukowski, giving you all of the latest in top stories in under 20 minutes over at the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and over on YouTube. So, Josh, the question has come up because it's looking like Micah Tease, who decommitted from Arkansas, is going to be heading to College Station to play for Texas A&M. Braylin Presley, he's going to Tulsa. Doesn't sound like Brennan Presley is going to be making the trip down to Norman. So what do we make of this as far as Oklahoma is concerned and their ability or inability? Because you go back even to Cole Adams back last spring, committed to Alabama over Oklahoma. What do you kind of make of that for the Sooners in their, just the way that they haven't necessarily been able to hit on some of the in-state kids, by Job being another guy?
Yeah, well, each case in recruiting, I think, is a little bit different, right? Sure, we can make some overarching connections between all of these, but like for By Job specifically, the previous staff didn't take By Job super seriously as a blue chip type prospect. And guess what? That burnt the current Oklahoma staff. It's as simple as that. By Job, when he came on campus by the previous staff, was sort of treated like, oh yeah, it's great to have you here, whatever, right? Was not treated like a priority, or at least didn't feel that way when he was on campus for his visit with the previous staff. So look, that's tough to overcome. Similar things really with Micah Tease, like we talked about, right? So when you weren't treated as a priority, or your idea of what your future looked like in college football doesn't match up with what the either previous staff or current staff's vision just positionally for you looks like, when you want to play wide receiver and they say, nah, you're a defensive back. And oh, by the way, you still have that bad feeling, bad taste from the previous staff. It doesn't just magically go away, John, just because there's new people maybe occupying the main office. I think I made the metaphor to you. It's, yeah, the business can get a new owner, but if you hated the business and were treated poorly by the business when you went and applied for the job, probably you're still going to have some bad feelings about said business, right? So I think that applies in both of those cases. Braylin Presley, Braylin Presley, not Brendan Presley. Braylin Presley, to me, I don't know the ins and outs of how this ultimately played out, John, but we can deduce this, right, from the way that he left Oklahoma State. He wants to be a Deebo Samuel type player. That's the best comparison I can make for it, because that's the first guy that comes to mind for me when I think of running back that also has a bunch of wide receiver type skills and gets used in a variety of different ways. If Oklahoma's vision, and I'm not saying this is the case, I'm just saying that I could see this being part of the hang-up here. And frankly, it looks like it might have been a hang-up for a lot of Power 5 teams out there, because Braylin Presley is winding up going to Tulsa, right, instead of ending up at a different Power 5 stop. So if the idea for Braylin Presley was, I want to do all these different things, and then maybe these coaching staffs are like, yeah, we kind of see you as more of a slot type receiver, and Braylin Presley has a different vision of that for himself, then you kind of maybe arrive at this destination where it's comfortable for Braylin Presley. It's a great get for Tulsa, right? I mean, it's a huge get for Tulsa. So it makes sense for both parties for Braylin Presley to go to Tulsa and kind of get to have his cake and eat it too, where maybe that wasn't going to be the case at a place like Oklahoma.
Yeah, and you're not going to get all of the in-state kids that you want to get just because you're Oklahoma. That's just the reality of the situation. Every state and every kind of premier school in that state deals with the same issue. Texas watches players go across the border to Louisiana, to Oklahoma. We're getting an offensive lineman from Colorado. It's kind of the way of the world. You're not always going to land the best prospects just because you're the best school in that state. Do you want to? Absolutely. You don't want to see a guy like Charlie Kohler going from Norman to Iowa State and then killing you, once a year. But that's just the reality of the situation. There's a lot of different circumstances that can lead a kid to decide to go out of state. Maybe they just want to see something different. Maybe they are going to have a better opportunity at another school. Maybe they don't really want to play for Oklahoma. I mean, that could just be as simple as that. But there's a lot of different things that could be at play as far as that goes. Now, go ahead, Josh.
Well, and look, Oklahoma might not be as high on some of these kids as the recruiting ranking indicates out there. I mean, it is what it is. We don't know the ins and outs of every last detail of a recruitment. It can be as simple as their vision for how they wanted to play at Oklahoma wasn't the same as the coaching staff's vision for said player. It could be that the evaluation of said player from Oklahoma's standpoint doesn't match up what 247 Sports or what Rivals or what On3 says. There's a lot of factors at play. I can tell you this, though, in relation to the recruiting the state of Oklahoma thing. If you want to come on here or, message us and say anything along the lines of this staff doesn't value in-state kids, look no further than Eric McCarty, who we've been talking about in this episode and in plenty of other ones. You don't think that Oklahoma doesn't value the players within its own four walls here? Of course they do. If they didn't, they wouldn't have went and signed Eric McCarty. They value the in-state kids. Now, again, is that going to match up what Rivals or 247 Sports or On3 says in every single instance? No, and Eric McCarty's a good example of, well, Oklahoma sees something in Eric McCarty that maybe the others don't.
And they made Jacoby Johnson a priority. Like, they are making really good Oklahoma players a priority. Again, you just have to trust their evaluations on things. Like, if there's a guy that they feel like is going to be a fit for them, they're going to go after them. They'll make him a priority. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some. That's just the reality. Bob Stoops didn't win every in-state recruiting battle. Mike Gundy doesn't win every in-state recruiting battle. They go elsewhere sometimes, and that's just how it goes. Let's turn the page. Let's talk about some positive news for the Oklahoma Sooners. Brandon Drumm, OUInsider, 247 Sports, issued a crystal ball for Louisiana Tech wide receiver transfer Tre Harris to land with the Oklahoma Sooners today. So that's positive. We've been talking to how Oklahoma needs to add some wide receiver talent in the transfer portal, whether Marvin Mims goes to the NFL or not. You just need somebody that has the ability to take a little bit of pressure off of Mims, provides another element, maybe a little bit different element in the receiving or in the passing game that helps Dillon Gabriel. So I like it. I'm excited about it. It's not as good as Dorian Singer, maybe not as good as Ra Thomas or Dante Cephas, but he's a guy that was a first-team all-conference player. He averaged 14-point-something yards per reception over the last couple of years. Went from 40 receptions in 2021 as a redshirt freshman to 65 receptions as a sophomore, 935 yards and 10 touchdowns. So all really good stuff out of Tre Harris out of Louisiana Tech.
No doubt. And Oklahoma needed an immediate infusion of productivity at wide receiver. They have to have that. I don't know that we totally write off JJ Hester or some of these other guys as being potentially still impact players at Oklahoma, but the bottom line is you've had one season in the books with a couple of the transfer portal ads that you brought in at wide receiver, and it didn't result in production from those said players, right? So with that in mind, probably you're ready to scoop up some more out of the transfer portal, and Tre Harris is a good get for Oklahoma. 6'2", so nice big-bodied receiver, 65 grabs, as you mentioned, nearly 1,000 yards, has for 2 seasons, like you said, 14 per catch, a little bit north of that actually, and has had 14 touchdown grabs. So this is someone that has a ton of college productivity in his back pocket. I'm with you. I would have loved to have seen Singer come into Norman too. And I mean, do we know what the writing on the wall is for either Cephas or Ra Thomas yet? Are either of those two names still possibilities for the Sooners?
It doesn't seem like it. It seems like those are going elsewhere, but you never know. It's still early in the transfer portal kind of days. Those guys don't have to make any commitments anytime soon. I haven't seen commitments, but it doesn't seem like those are really on the radar much recently. So it looks like it's going to be Tre Harris, which again, I like the addition, whether Marvin Mims is going to be here or not. I think he just brings a little bit different element to your game. You know, he's not kind of the deep threat that Marvin Mims is, but that's okay. You need somebody that can win in the short to intermediate part of the field. And that's what he does, but he has a really good average depth of target, 10.8 for his career, for this past season. Average depth of target for his career is 11.8. So he will win, past the sticks. And that's what I want is I want somebody that they can feel comfortable to throw the football, down the field, and not necessarily the deep ball, the go route, but throw to the 5 to 15 yard range, so you're not having to rely so much on the bubble screen and yards after the catch and things like that. So, I mean, he's an effective deep ball receiver, but does most of his work in the, like I said, the 10 to 20 yard range. That's really where he kind of made his money this past season. So I like that addition if they're able to pull that off and get that commitment from Tre Harris. Again, not a Power 5 guy, but a guy that is looking to make the jump to Power 5 football. They got a couple Power 5 guys at wide receiver in the transfer portal last year. They didn't really play much. So if this is a guy that you feel good can come in and contribute right away, that's great. He's a former quarterback, played quarterback in high school. And I think that's also a really nice element to have, not to come play quarterback, but just somebody who's going to understand offense to a little bit maybe deeper level and is going to be more quarterback friendly for your quarterback. And then you want to throw some of those wide receiver passes, those those throwbacks, things like that. You got a guy that's thrown the football before, kind of like your new Braden Willis, someone you can use on the trick plays. So I like it. I think it's going to be a good ad if they do indeed add him. Any more thoughts on Tre Harris before we finish up here, Josh?
No, I mean, look, they needed to bring somebody at wide receiver in from the transfer portal. They've done that. And, again, hopefully – one of their transfer portal ads in either J.J. Hester or LV Bunkley Shelton can still be some kind of a difference maker before it's all said and done at Oklahoma. I'd like to see the Sooners, if they can, land one of those other names at wide receiver that we've talked about. It doesn't necessarily sound like that's trending to be the case for either Thomas or Cephas. And, there's a lot of time between now and us kicking off this 2023 football season. So there's some things that can still happen, right? I don't know if there's maybe somebody that's a little disgruntled in the college football playoff that's a wide receiver that would be looking for a new home as soon as those seasons officially end up in the college football playoff, right? There could be some names to look at there. I don't have that on any authority, just tossing it out there. And then post-spring, right? There should be some shuffling, not as much shuffling, but maybe a shuffle or two here or there. So All of which is to say, I don't think we're necessarily done seeing Oklahoma potentially try and pluck a wide receiver or two if they can.
Indeed. Marvin Mims, Dillon Gabriel spoke after practice on Monday. It's Tuesday now. They spoke after practice on Monday, but didn't really give much in the way of what their future holds with the Oklahoma Sooners. They didn't say whether they're coming back. They didn't say whether they're staying. They said the decision's kind of still out there, haven't made a decision yet, or it isn't the right time for them to make a decision. What do you make of that, Josh?
They don't have to share that their mind is made up yet before the bowl game. I do think that, generally speaking, it's good news for Oklahoma, particularly with Marvin Mims, that I tend to now side on the fact that he is leaning toward coming back, simply because, John, with the buzz coming into this past season, right? If Mims was going, then probably he's already opted out of this bowl game by now, right? So he said, if you missed it, and credit to Sooner Scoop and those guys for tossing the video out there. It's an easy find if you just search Sooner Scoop, and you can see what both Gabriel and Mims said on the video side over there with them on social media. But it sounds like, I mean, Mims said as much as he got his NFL draft grade back, John, and he didn't really elaborate any further on whether or not, said draft grade was enough to get him to toss his name into declaring for the draft or staying with Oklahoma. But I kind of err on the side of he probably didn't get enough of an assurance that I want to put my name in the NFL draft, because he hadn't opted out yet, right? And he's playing in the bowl game. So, and maybe Mims is just the kind of guy that not every player is opting out of a bowl game, even when they, I'm conditioned to feel this way now, just based on the way college football plays out. And it wouldn't, I'm talking myself the other direction here a little bit, John, but it wouldn't shock me if Mims was the kind of teammate that's like, hey, I want to play in the bowl game one final time with my team. But just general sense, general terms here, I think it's a good sign for Oklahoma that he's playing in the bowl game, because I feel like he probably would have opted out if he wasn't coming back next season.
Yeah, I kind of want to think the same thing too. But I feel like I went down this road last year with Caleb Williams and Mario Williams. And Mario Williams played in the bowl game too, and then they went to USC. So I don't know. I'm still going to sit here and kind of wait it out. I don't feel confident one way or the other on it. I don't feel like their words indicated anything, except we're going to have to wait until after December 28th when they play in the Cheez-It Bowl. So hopefully we find out pretty quickly after that. And not, I mean, they don't care about us. They don't care what we think, but just more like, so that, the coaching staff knows, like, okay, how active do we need to be in the wide receiver transfer portal? Do we need to go find a starting quarterback? Because you're not going to have a lot of opportunity to find a starting quarterback in the transfer portal if you don't have time to do that, if you have to sit around and wait. So yeah, I think they will. I don't think that they'll sit on their hands like Caleb Williams did last year and wait until just a day before National Signing Day to make his decision or make his announcement. I think that they'll be like Dillon Gabriel and Marvin Mims. It won't be long after the bowl game before we know what their future holds.
I do think one thing in that regard with Oklahoma that's working to their advantage, I said as much with Plank on the radio side earlier this morning, but Dillon Gabriel's relationship, John, with Jeff Lebby just makes me feel like he's not going to blindside this coaching staff. And I think that if he wasn't coming back to OU, I think you would have already known that by now. I think the writing's on the wall. He's coming back. He will be your starting quarterback next season. Because, again, if he wasn't, John, because of the long-standing nature of that relationship between Dillon Gabriel and Jeff Lebby particularly, right? Just specific to Jeff Lebby and Dillon Gabriel. He might, and this is what I said on the radio side, he might hate every single person in Norman and on campus, but he doesn't feel that way about Jeff Lebby. And, oh, by the way, he didn't hate everybody in Norman. I'm just to illustrate a point here. His relationship with Jeff Lebby dates so far back, John, to where, to me, it would be shocking if he burnt Jeff Lebby and Oklahoma by proxy and did not let him know what his intentions were, even right now today. So sure, is there a little bit of a decision-making process still taking place? Yeah, I think so, but you heard it from Mims himself. He's got his NFL draft grade back. I assume that Dillon Gabriel has gotten his NFL draft grade back. So I think Gabriel's back, and I think probably he and the staff pretty well know that already by now. Now, he hasn't shared that with us, and he hasn't been public about that, and I don't think that he needs to. But if he wasn't coming back, John, don't you think with Nick Evers bolting that Oklahoma would have been active in some regard with a transfer portal quarterback? They haven't been. So that, to me, just putting everything together, he's coming back next season for Oklahoma.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think Mims is back as well, but I'm not really willing to bank on it yet. I'm not gonna put all my dollars on Oklahoma and that returning. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. We're just 8 days now from the bowl game, so we're gonna get actual football to talk about next week. But we're gonna be talking early signing period. Who signed on the first day of early signing period on Wednesday? Who's left to sign? What it might mean for the Oklahoma Sooners. Will we get some big announcements? We'll see how it all plays out. We got 3 days of early signing coming up. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'll talk about it all here on the Locked On Sooners podcast. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all platforms. Go to YouTube, hit the subscribe button, and smash that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Hit a like as well, and then go leave a 5-star review for us over on Apple to help other people find out about the show. But until next time, he's Josh Helmer. I'm John Williams. We'll catch you then. Boomer Sooner.